right, good evening, everyone, and welcome. I am really glad you're here. My name is Tammy Curtis, and I will be your host for the webinar. The Parent Connective is an event made possible through a small grant that I received from the Utah State College of Arts and Sciences and Bear River Health Department. It's a collaboration with the Sorenson Legacy Foundation Center for Clinical Excellence and other local agencies. This webinar series was created with one core belief in mind. Parenting isn't meant to be done alone, nor is it meant to be done perfectly. So many parents today are carrying quiet questions, doubts, and worries, often while being surrounded by loud advice, social media trends, and unrealistic expectations. This series is an invitation to step out of that noise and into something more grounded and practical. We have amazing resources in our community. We have clinical expertise. And over the next several months, I'm excited to explore topics around parent management strategies, such as this evening, shame-free conversations, understanding adversity and resilience, supporting intense emotions, family connection, and repair. As you'll notice throughout our series, we're not here to give quick fixes or perfect formulas, but across our time together, we'll talk about the parts of parenting that don't always show up in books or social media, the moments when things can feel messy, emotional, and uncertain. We'll want to look at what's under and understand what's underneath the behavior, learning how connection can change outcomes, building skills that support regulation for both parents and kids, and practicing repair when things don't go the way that we hoped. We can let go of shame and unrealistic expectations. Our conversations are less about doing more and more about seeing things differently, noticing patterns, slowing our reactions, and responding with intention rather than reaction. You may hear ideas that feel affirming and others that feel challenging. Both are welcome. This is a safe space for reflection, not judgment. Our sessions are led by trusted community partners and clinicians who work with families every day. The goal isn't to tell you how to parent, but to offer tools, language, and perspective that can help you adapt to your own family and values. And before we begin, I want to name something important. This is a judgment-free space. Parenting is complex, especially in today's world. Wherever you are in your journey, whether things feel steady or overwhelming, you belong here. You're welcome to participate in whatever way feels comfortable to you. Your cameras may be on or off. You're welcome to present questions in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat and just simply listening. Also, this session is recorded and it will be available for viewing at a later date. Thank you so much for taking the time to show up for your family and yourself. Let's go ahead and get started. First, we are so fortunate to be able to learn from our presenters. They are going to teach us some strategies from parent management training. First, Kelsey Croson is a doctoral candidate in school psychology at Utah State. She has experience supporting children and families across diverse educational and clinical settings. She's currently a student clinician at the Behavioral Health Clinic and provides individual and group therapy as well as comprehensive neurodevelopmental assessments. Thank you, Kelsey, for being here to present to us tonight. Sarah Bahoshian is a licensed clinical psychologist and assistant clinical faculty in the psychology department at Utah State. She runs the training clinic at the Sorenson Legacy Foundation Center and serves as the clinical counseling and school psychology doctoral programs while maintaining her own therapy caseload. We are so fortunate to have her here tonight. She is passionate about helping individuals and families navigate barriers, both internal and external, to living full and meaningful lives. Kelsey, I'll go ahead and turn the time over to you. Hold on just a second. Is it allowing you to share?
Oh, there we go. Okay. Sorry, it muted me and I could not get it to not unmute me. So there we
Okay,
go.
good, good, good.
Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. Okay, thank you everybody for joining us today. I know it's a big deal to spend an hour of your evening anywhere at this point, and so we are incredibly lucky to have you guys spend it with us, and we are grateful for that. Particularly when we're talking about such important skills as parenting and such important topics as parenting. So thank you for joining us today. So we're going to be talking a little bit about parent management training and what that means and what that is, and some skills we can take away with that. So just to give you kind of an overview of what we're going to be talking about today. So the first thing that we're really going to address is kind of the core of what parent management training is, who it's intended for, what concerns it addresses. We're also going to be talking about some specific strategies, just due to the timeline of what we are looking at. Typically, we do these trainings within 6 to 8 weeks, within a lot of different timeframes and a lot of different strategies that we use within that time frame. So we only have an hour today, so we're just going to be covering just a few little pieces of parent management strategies that you can use and take away to change some of the conversations that you have at home away from conflict and struggle to maybe a little bit more closer to positive interactions. And then the last part that we're going to be looking at is next steps, right? So after just spending this little bit of time with us, what can I do next, right? How can I access this? How can I learn more about it? How can I get support in being able to do these things if that's something that interests you? So those are kind of the structure that we're going to follow today. We're going to start at the very beginning of talking about those core principles as well as sort of the intent behind parent management training. So it's always good to kind of root this in reality, right? Some of these concepts can feel really abstract and kind of hard to apply to me and us in particular. And so we're going to talk about all of this through an example, right, of a actual kid. Okay, so we're going to be talking about Julie, who is 9 years old. So this is sort of the situation that Julie and her family are experiencing, right? There's a lot of difficulties going on at home. There's a lot of difficulties also happening at school. And mostly what they've identified is that it is defiant behaviors. And so anytime that Julie is being asked to do certain things, like for example, when she's asked to get ready for school, eat her food, wake up, get dressed, brush her hair, get in the car, get out of the car to be able to go to school, all of those steps within her morning routine, she's meeting her parents with, nope, I won't do it. You can't make me, right? And various other ways that that sort of defiance can kind of come out. Things like, no, or I'm not going to do that. I want to go home. I don't want to be involved. Different aspects of that defiance are kind of coming out from those steps. It's also translating into school, right? Her teacher comes up and says, hey, Julie, I need you to do this assignment. And she meets that back with no, or she's meeting it with ignoring the teacher and various different defiant activities. Then we're seeing that kind of happen when she comes home too, right? So she's coming home, she's not wanting to be involved with her homework. She's meeting that again with some defiant behaviors of no, I won't do it. She's ignoring mom and dad when they ask her to do it. And then she's also not wanting to do her chores, not wanting to do anything that is not necessarily something that she really likes to do. And so a lot of these defiant behaviors are coming out at home and at school, and all of the strategies that her parents are using are just not quite working for her, right? They've tried timeout, they've tried removal of privileges, they've tried all these different things, and they're still being met with some of these defiant behaviors. And as a result of all this, all these things are kind of stacking up to they're starting to get into these fights, right? Julie keeps saying, nope, I'm not going to do it. Mom and dad start getting really frustrated, and then it ends up having some fights going on at home too between the two to try to get her to do things. And they also start losing some privileges, right? So Julie's not being able to go hang out with friends. She's not able to go do family activities because she's not doing these things that she should be doing, like doing her chores and her homework. And so all around, everybody at home is kind of miserable and not having a good time. And so parents coming to us saying, hey, what can I do about this, right? How can I help Julie? How can we help ourselves to be able to make this work for everybody? So I just want to reiterate another thing that was talked about just at the beginning that Tammy had discussed, and that no one is meant to parent a child alone. I do just want to kind of talk about this for just a minute. Hearing this story from Julie, I'm sure some of this can kind of resonate, or similar behaviors that you're seeing at home with the various children that you have as well. And so we just want to reiterate that humans are incredibly complex creatures. We have a lot of very complicated situations happening in our outside world as well as our inside world. And it takes us a really long time to try to figure out how to navigate that outside world and that internal world, right? 20 plus years of us trying to figure this out and trying to be able to be independent and do what we need to do. And that is a really heavy burden to be holding as just a single parent or a parent group, to be able to do that on your own. You were never meant to do that alone, even though that parent pressure has just ex or has just gotten worse and worse all throughout the years, right? It's more and more on your plate to be able to know everything about how you're supposed to parent your kid to make sure that make a very good human who can do all the things out in the world by themselves, and make a difference in the world and reach their potential. And so throughout all of human history, we have always had groups of people like family, friends, schools, professionals, churches, all sorts of groups of people, neighbors, everybody who can kind of come together and kind of help lift that load for us. And so we just want to reiterate again that we are part of your group, right? We are part of your community. We are here to help you. And so these are strategies that we can offer. And if it's something that you feel like is going to help, definitely take it with you. Contact us to get a little bit more information if that's something that you need some support with. But just know that you don't have a handbook on how to do this. And so it's okay to rely on other people and reach out for some support. And that's what we're so grateful that you are here today to do that. So let's talk a little bit more about sort of that PMT, who is it for piece that we were going to address. And so parent management training is really good for what we consider externalizing behaviors or externalizing problems. We kind of put behaviors into two camps. One of it is externalizing and one of it is internalizing. So the externalizing problems is kind of what we consider those behaviors that come out when we're feeling negative emotions, right? So they look like a lot of things like acting out, hitting, defiance, tantrums or outbursts, impulsivity, yelling or screaming. That's always a favorite from parents, right? Aggression, off-task behaviors, destruction, non-compliance to any rules or instructions, so just not doing it, throwing things, right? And then those are a lot of just externalized behaviors that we tend to see when we're experiencing some negative emotions, particularly with kids. There's also internalizing behaviors, okay, or internalizing problems. And those are when we are experiencing some negative emotions and we sort of deal with it within the internal world. So we're not directing it towards anybody or any system or any object per se. It's more we're keeping it inside. So that can look like being fearful. That can look like avoidance, withdrawal. That can look like a lot of different things. So PMT is more appropriate for the externalizing problems, right? Experiencing some negative emotions and then pushing that outward in some very clear behaviors that are kind of happening. It also can be helpful for some of the internalizing pieces. Particularly, we found that it can work pretty well with anxiety. There's some parent strategies that we're going to show with you today that can really help establish some routine and some structure and some things that kids can kind of rely on a little bit more and can help sort of alleviate some of those anxiety behaviors at home. And so there's some sort of overlap a little bit within the internalizing problems, but for the most part, when we're talking about PMT, usually we're using it to address some of these more externally observable behaviors. So what is PMT? What is parent management training, right? So essentially what this is it's when a clinician is working with parents to address some of those problematic externalizing behaviors, right? So when we see some of those more negative emotions coming outward towards other people, objects, the environment, society, different things like that, that's typically when we would use this PMT sort of intervention. So what it is a clinician will sit down and we will work with parents and we are going to teach you how to increase the behaviors that you want to see, what we consider pro-social behaviors, through the intentional use of your attention, right, of parents' attention. And then it's also at the same time working to decrease those problematic behaviors. And that's through using very intentional disciplined strategies. Okay. And we're going to talk about kind of both ends of those today. PMT is often delivered with a clinician. It's delivered in a group setting sometimes where we have, several parents come together and sort of talk through some of these things and problem solve through some of these things, share their own experience using some of these strategies. Or it can be in individual sessions where it's just the parents and the clinician and working together to try to work through some of these different strategies and apply it specifically to their homes. So PMT, who is it for, right? So we kind of talked about how it's typically used with that externalizing behavior. We also typically use it with elementary or school-age children. And so that's kind of where we found the biggest effect to happen is kind of in that age range. Some of the skills can be adapted to be used with older children, like teenagers or older teenagers, but the research is a lot more limited in that area. And so we don't quite know the whole effect of what those strategies have for those. And a lot of things haven't been tailored specifically with those effects towards that population. So usually between the elementary and school age children range is kind of who we're looking at here. And then PMT has been done with various family structures and demographics. It's very well researched. And so a lot of different people have been using this with a lot of different families to be able to help with those situations that are occurring at home. Okay, so now that we kind of know what it is, right, we're sort of intervening on those externalizing behaviors with parents. Let's kind of talk about how it works. Like, why does this work? Why is this such a research base that everybody has been using? It has a good evidence base that clinicians are talking about. Why does it work? Well, there's a lot of different theories behind it, but we're going to just sort of talk about some of these pieces that kind of come into PMT. The first one is that brains really, really like structure and they really like things to be very clear and very predictable. And so part of what we do in PMT is to structure sort of the home environment and the way that you interact with your kid in a way that is very predictable and very clear, right? It's establishing a clear expectation as well as establishing clear consequences for when we do and do not follow that expectation. So it adds a lot of structure and a lot of safety in that regard for kids because they know exactly what to expect from you. And so young brains in particular really, really like that when it's very structured and clear because they're still trying to learn the rules of this really complex human world that we're in. And the clearer it can be, the better it is for them. And they can follow through with that and they attach to that a little bit more if it's very clear and predictable. So another big concept behind why PMT works is because we are a very social species. Okay. We really thrive when we're interacting with each other and able to use each other and grow together, right? And access our community. And so, because of that, one of our biggest motivators for the reason we do a lot of things that we do throughout the day and throughout our lives is because we are wanting attention from other people, right? Particularly, we really like when we get positive attention from other people. And so children in particular really respond well with that, right? They really love when an adult is telling them, you are doing exactly what I need you to do. I love that you're doing that. Thank you for doing that, right? Giving them a lot of that positive feedback. They really respond well to that because that's telling them, okay, in this crazy world that I'm trying to figure out that a lot of rules are happening, this was one I did well, right? It provides, again, another piece of safety and it really helps them understand, okay, this is what I'm expected to do and I'm getting that positive attention, which means I need to keep doing that. And then another concept that we're going to add into this as well is that generally humans really love it when they are in positive experiences or experiencing positive emotions or involved with positive relationships, right? If you think about how we typically structure our day, we try to go to relationships that we really want to spend time with, right? When we have that precious alone time that we can do whatever we want to do with that time, a lot of times we'll seek it out with friends, right? People that we really enjoy or family that we really enjoy being around. We want to do activities that bring us a lot of joy, or we want to have experiences that we know are going to be exciting and bring us a lot of comfort and contentment and relaxing. And so all of these different things are typically what we seek out, right, throughout life and throughout our day. And so if we're in unpleasant situations, we often are motivated to escape those, to get out of unpleasant situations and find more positive experiences. And so we learn throughout life is that some of those unpleasant situations we have to do, right? Nobody really loves doing all the chores that we have to do, or going to work every single day, or having to make dinner every single day, or things like that. But we do them because we have to, right? But we've learned that we don't necessarily need to escape those situations because there is a benefit to that. Kids haven't necessarily learned that some of those things aren't necessarily something we need to escape, right? So some of those escape situations can kind of come out quite a bit with kids. And so part of what PMT does is trying to use that motivator for escape and understand it and set up situations so that we are encountering rewarding, essentially positive experiences and not necessarily punishing trying to escape. So, with this, right, talking about with kids and those externalizing problems, the yelling, the tantrums, the refusals, the defiance, a lot of times they're motivated by those two things that we kind of talked about, right? Gaining attention and escaping unpleasant situations. A lot of times those are a communication that kids use of saying, I don't like this, I don't want to do it, or I really am needing some attention right now and I'm not getting it, so I'm going to start doing these things to try to get that. And so this is a really big point that we're going to talk about throughout this. Positive and negative attention, they do the same need, right? They fit the same need. And so sometimes kids learn, oh, I'm not going to get positive attention from doing this. So I'm going to do it because I'm going to get attention anyway, even if it's negative attention. And so that's another piece that we're going to kind of build into this is that those are going to serve the same need, that attention piece. But we're going to talk about how we can kind of put a little bit more weight on the positive attention as opposed to just giving negative attention for those externalizing behaviors. So we're going to tie this a little bit back to Julie to kind of ground this a little bit because some of these can be kind of abstract. So Julie writes with those defiance behaviors saying, no, you're not going to make me do it. No, I'm not going to do it, and ignoring adults. Those things are happening at certain times, right? And part of the work that we do in PMT is really evaluating the behaviors and saying, when do they come up, right? When do they happen? What situations are kind of occurring? And so the ones with Julie that we're seeing, right? She has to go to school, right? She has to do work at school and she has to do homework and chores at home. So, what do those things all have in common, right? Looking at those situations, well, they're kind of unpleasant for a kid usually, right? They're not necessarily things that she would want to do, right? If she can just be sitting watching YouTube, that would be a much more preferred experience. If she can be playing with her toys, that's a much more preferred experience than doing chores and homework, or having to go to school when she could be at home playing. Those are kind of unpleasant experiences that Julie just hasn't necessarily built up the tolerance to be able to handle. And so she's using kind of that escape function a little bit here. She's also not getting a whole lot of adult attention during those times, right? They're kind of independent activities for the most part, or the adults in the room are probably attending to other things as opposed to her. And so there's kind of a twofold there, right? It's unpleasant and she's not getting a whole lot of attention during these things. So she kind of doesn't want to do it, right? And so, what she's learned through her refusal behaviors, and not necessarily anything that the parents have done, but it's just things that she's kind of picked up because our brains put patterns together, is that if she is using these defiant behaviors, if she's saying no all the time, sometimes she doesn't have to do it, right? She's kind of getting rewarded with not having to do all these things all the time. Not every time, but sometimes. And she's going to keep doing that because then sometimes she might not have to do it, right? I might not have to do my chore if I keep saying no and I'm annoying mom enough that she just does it for me, right? Or I don't always have to do my homework because if I say no enough, then we end up just not having to get around to doing the homework, right? We're spending all this time arguing or fighting between each other instead of actually doing the tasks. So she still is getting out of doing it. And then also she gets attention from adults when she doesn't do it. Oftentimes it ends up being, well, why aren't you doing your homework? I need you to be doing your homework. We need you to do this chore, right? All of those little promptings that you're ending up getting, or all those different ways that you're engaging with Julie, are still telling her, hey, I'm getting attention here, right? My parents are focused on me. They're not focused on anything else that's going on in the world. They're giving me attention. Even though it's negative attention, I'm still getting that attention, which is something that I desire. And then sometimes the consequences of not doing it are a lot better than doing the task itself, right? So sometimes mom sends me to my room, and so I just get to kind of hang out in my room with the things that I really like and enjoy, and I don't have to do the task that I don't really want to do. And so all of these things are Julie is picking these things up as we go. So how can PMT help Julie and her parents? So there's a lot of different strategies that we're using here with PMT to be able to help these kind of situations that come up. The first one is that PMT helps Julie and her parents build a positive relationship. So her parents' positive attention is something that she ends up wanting. So part of PMT is us being able to build up the relationship between the parent and the kid. Sorry, my voice is cutting out here. Hmm. And so we're spending actual time building up that relationship. So PMT also helps Julie's parents learn how to clearly communicate their expectations. Sorry, I'm going to use a cough drop here. My voice is kind of cutting out on me.
Now you're good. And I could also open it up for a
No,
question or clarification if you want a second.
so we'll just get through this first section and then we can go from there.
Okay, sounds good.
It's just a really dry year here. I'm kind of struggling here. We're good.
It's okay. You're doing great.
Okay, so PMT can also help with Julie's parents to be able to clearly communicate their expectations, right? That's part of the work that we do is to make sure that they are actually telling Julie exactly what they want her to do in a way that she understands and that she totally understands what the negative consequences are that can happen and what the positive consequences are that can happen. And another way that we work with Julie's parents here with PMT is that we're helping teach Julie's parents when to give attention to things that Julie wants, that they want Julie to do. So if she's doing her homework, if she's doing chores, right, we're giving her positive attention in that regard to reinforce that that is something we want you to do, right? That is something that we appreciate that you're doing. That is something you should be doing. And all of that attention is just reinforcing that idea for Julie. And on the flip side of that, we are trying not to give attention to things that we don't want Julie to do. So when she's yelling and screaming and refusing, ignoring adults, we're not going to be giving attention to that, right? Because we don't want her to know that that's something that we want her to know that that's something we don't want her to do. We don't want her to associate that with something that we would want her to do. And so removing the attention from that helps communicate to Julie that we're not going to give you attention for that, so it's not worth your time to do those behaviors. And then also, Julie learns from all of this situation, right, with PMT, is that she can balance doing preferred and non-preferred activities because that's something that is part of our life, right? We have to do things that we don't necessarily want to do, but are good for us to do and good things that we can contribute. And there are times when we can do those preferred activities, and that helps her learn when those things are, like when she should be doing preferred versus non-preferred activities, as well as a more acceptable way to sort of handle her negative emotions. Yelling, screaming, hitting, throwing things, those are not behaviors that are going to help her develop long-term relationships that are going to carry through her life. And so us being able to use some of these parent strategies help us to communicate to Julie, hey, there's a different way to handle your negative emotions to where you're not impacting other people around you, where you're not going to impact the relationship that you have with these other people. It's going to be a more pro-social way, right? A more adaptable way to sort of handle these negative emotions. That cough drop helps so much, Sarah. Thank you. Okay, so that's kind of the core of what we were talking about with PMT strategies or with the core of PMT. It's focused mostly on externalizing behaviors. We're looking mostly at how to use your attention appropriately to reinforce the behaviors that you're wanting to see from your child. And then how to not attend to the things that you don't want your child to do. It's using that intention very structured, as well as building up more of the positive relationship that you have with your child. So now we're going to kind of go into those strategy parts. Tammy, do we have any questions that need to be kind of clarified here or any points that need to be clarified?
No, not yet. So feel free to type in the chat any questions or any clarification that you'd like. Just put that in the chat for me and I'll make sure and ask Kelsey.
Yeah, I will happily go into more depth or recover anything that we need to in order to really establish that foundation for you. So now that we kind of have a clear understanding of sort of what PMT is used for, right, who it's used for, what sort of strategies we're going to be talking about, let's actually start building from that foundation and teach you just a few strategies that we can use. So I do want to reiterate that these strategies are just a sampling of what we do with PMT. So it's just three pieces of some strategies. And we often will take these strategies and actually go really far in depth with them and really tailor them and apply them to what's going on in your home and how you can use it, what's going on with your parenting style, and make it match with the situation that you're in. So this is just kind of like a brief overview of some of these strategies. We were going to give you resources at the end to sort of learn more about how to use these more appropriately for your home and your situation, and then let you have access as well to more support and with different ways that we can support you with that. So the first one talking kind of about those expectations, right? Making sure our expectations are very clear. So if you remember, we talked about brains really like structure, clarity, and predictability. So this is the way that we get at that idea, right? Of making sure that we're embedding structure, clarity, and predictability in our home. And it's all through clear communication. So clear communication, what that is going to entail and in the home setting is you need to make sure that you are presenting the expectation to your child in the most direct, simple form that your child will be able to understand. The goal behind this is we don't want the child to have any sort of interpretation that is not the one that you are providing, right? You want them to do an exact behavior the way that you have established for them, and you don't want them to interpret that any differently. And so you provide that very clear expectation. And then through consistency in the way that you go about presenting these expectations and what you do after you present the expectations, you will communicate the positive consequence that'll happen if your child chooses to follow this expectation and the negative consequence that follows if your child chooses not to follow this expectation. And through consistency, your child will start to learn exactly what will happen and will know exactly what happens every single time. When mom or dad or whoever tells me this, right, when they say, this is the expectation, I know if I don't do it, this will happen. If I do it, this will happen. And that consistency creates that structure and that predictability in the home. So here's a way that we talk through giving clear expectations, right? What does that look like? What does that sound like? How do I do that? The first one is you want to give only a command when you can follow through. And a command could be a direction, an instruction, a task, whatever it is that you're communicating to your child that you need them to do. Okay. You only give that when you are able to follow through with what happens afterward, right? So I give the expectation, I need to be able to respond when when they do the task. And I need to be able to respond if they don't do the task. Okay. So you need to give yourself time to be able to respond to those things when you give an expectation. So with that, we don't want to be giving them kind of in passing, right? Giving them an expectation and then going on our way and not seeing if they actually follow through with the task or not. The other part of it is you want to make sure you have your child's attention before you give a command. Okay, so making sure that they're looking at you, making sure you're looking at them. There's just a clear way to say, okay, you are attending to me, you're not attending to something else that where you may mishear me or you may not be able to process what I'm asking you to do. I want you to be looking at me and I'm looking at you and I'm clearly we're on the same page, right? We're going to be able to have this communication here. You only want to give one instruction. Okay. And it has to be an instruction that your child is capable of completing. Sometimes life gets really, really busy and you have a lot of things that your child needs to do. So you're saying, okay, I need you to take out the trash and then I need you to put your dishes away and then I need you to feed the dog. Okay. That's often something that we end up doing because we need to make sure we're communicating all of these things quickly. What will happen sometimes is the child will hear, okay, so there was something with the trash and I need to feed the dog. And that middle one can sometimes get missed. So we want to just really break it down and just give one command, okay, one direction. I need you to feed the dog. Okay, and that's it. And it needs to be something that your child is capable of completing. So, for example, if you say, okay, I need you to unload the dishwasher, but the cabinets are really high and the kid can't get to all areas to where they would need to put the dishes away, and there's not really a procedure in place to where they know where to put those dishes, that's not necessarily something they're going to be able to complete. So it's got to be something that you know your child is capable of doing and that you can give them just that one instruction and you know that they'll be able to follow through with that. Again, you want to be very direct and simple. So don't make it complicated. Just say exactly what it is that you need them to do. We also suggest to not phrase any directions as questions. So sometimes what we'll see is that parents will say, would you like to feed the dog? And then that opens up the answers yes and no. And oftentimes kids will be like, no, I don't want to. That's not something I want to do, right? So you just want to make sure that you're not phrasing it as a question or a suggestion like, hey, could you feed the dog? Right? Even just that could is opening that question of maybe I could or I could not, right? You want to make sure it's just a one answer, yes, I will do this, right? Make sure that you are saying, I need you to feed the dog or please feed the dog. Just make it very direct. And then you also want to focus on what you want them to do, not what you don't want them to do. So sometimes there's a lot of noise and a lot of chaos going on. Child's yelling, you'll say, hey, stop yelling. Okay. That is not as effective as saying exactly what you're wanting them to do. Okay. So instead of saying stop yelling, we're going to use a little bit different phrasing, like please use a quiet voice, right? So you're telling them exactly what you want them to do instead of leaving it up for their interpretation of saying, okay, if I'm not yelling, does that mean I can scream? Right. And so we don't want to open up any sort of interpretation. We want to just make sure we're very clear and very direct. Please use a quiet voice. So what that can kind of look like here. So here's an example with Julie. So Julie's parents want Julie to fold her laundry. So they wait until they are able to ask Julie to do the task, and they are able to provide the consequence if Julie complies with that direction and when she doesn't comply with that direction. So what they do is they wait and they gain Julie's eye contact. They attend only to Julie, so they're not paying attention to all the other things going on in the home. They're only looking at Julie. And they say in a very calm, that's another part, you want to be very calm, in a matter-of-fact voice, say, Julie, please fold your laundry. That's very direct, simple, one task, something that she's capable of doing. Okay, so that's the first strategy that we work on PMT is making sure that those expectations are very clearly communicated to the child. The other part that we work on PMT is what happens after, right? When we give that clear expectation, what do we do in order to provide a positive consequence? And what do we do in order to provide a negative consequence? And that's when we use reinforcement. So this, if you remember, we talked at the start, some of those core principles that are in PMT, that's when we're looking at attention and escape as those big motivators of humans. How can we use those intentionally as parents in order to get children to do what they need to be doing in the home and make sure that we're reinforcing those skills so that they can be independent humans reaching their fullest potential later on. So what we use as a big term is called differential reinforcement. Essentially what that means is we need to be reinforcing the behaviors that we want to see and not reinforcing the behaviors we don't want to see. And so a way that we do that is by putting our attention on the behaviors that we want to see. So remember, kids are very motivated by attention from adults that they respect, that they look up to. And so being able to put your attention on the desired behaviors is what we're looking for. So if your child is doing something you want them to be doing, praise them for it, right? Attend to them, even just describing what they're doing. Oh, Julie, you're folding your laundry. That's giving positive attention to Julie, and she's recognizing, oh, when I do this, this is a good outcome, right? Mom or dad is very happy with me because they're putting their attention on me. So here's an example of what that looks like when we put that attention on a desired behavior. So Julie folds her laundry like we had asked. She is immediately met with warm, positive attention from her parents. Thank you for folding your laundry when we asked. It's just a simple thing that you can add to whenever your child is doing something you want them to do, of just saying, thank you for doing that, right? And being very specific about what task they had done that warranted that attention from you. So now there's that other element of the preferred activities, right? So now that she's folded her laundry, she's able to go spend the rest of her time playing. So you want to be very intentional about when you give certain expectations and certain tasks and instructions, and you want to be able to give them opportunity to do preferred activities, right? We don't want to just constantly be giving just those non-preferred activities in a row because they're going to wear out on that. They're not going to want to do all of those. So just be a bit intentional about when you're putting those preferred activities in there too. Like, great, you did what I asked. Now you get to go play. You get to go do something that you enjoy. What these two things teach Julie is that she is going to get good outcomes whenever she's doing what parents are asking her to do, right? When she folds her laundry, she gets positive attention from her parents and she gets to go do a preferred activity afterward. So that is that positive consequence, right? That's how we sort of handle that situation when they actually follow through with what we've asked. The bigger one that tends to happen is when they don't follow through, right? Particularly with Julie and her defiant behaviors. So we don't want to add attention to the behavior of not folding the laundry. So if Julie decides not to fold her laundry, we want to give the benefit of the doubt and give one reminder. There may be Julie didn't hear it all the way, she didn't process it, maybe she didn't understand it. We just want to give her the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, we're going to let you have one reminder. So, Julie, please fold your laundry. If Julie again chooses not to fold her laundry, we give a timeout. So the timeout is just an opportunity to be placed somewhere. It's usually kind of in the home where you can still view the child in a way, in a place that they're not going to have access to a lot of things that they really like, right? So usually it's like a dining room chair that's just kind of in a place where they can't grab a lot of things. There's not a lot of interesting things to look at. It's just kind of a boring situation or boring place in the house. We're going to put her there for a little bit of time, and then we're going to let her leave and say, okay, Julie, here's another opportunity. Okay. We need you to fold your laundry. And then if she again chooses not to, the cycle continues. She goes back in timeout for a certain amount of time, and then she comes back out and we give her the other opportunity. Julie, we need you to fold your laundry. And as soon as she decides, yep, okay, I'm tired of this. This is really boring. I don't like this. I'm going to fold my laundry. Then we meet her with that positive attention. Thank you for folding your laundry. And she's able to go access her preferred activities. When she shows minor misbehaviors like refusing, when she says no, when she's yelling, when she's screaming, when she's pestering you, being like, why do I need to fold my laundry? Why can't my little brother fold the laundry? Why can't you fold the laundry? Why do I have to do it? Why can't I do this instead? We want to ignore all of those behaviors. Okay. So, again, if you remember at the start, we talked about how attention, positive and negative attention, are the same thing, they serve the same need. And so when we're giving negative attention to that, she's still getting attention out of it. And so it's going to reinforce her doing those kind of behaviors. She's going to pester you more. She might yell and scream a little bit more because you're attending to those behaviors. So what we want to do when we ignore those behaviors is that teaches Julie that these behaviors are not worth the effort, right? She's not going to get any attention out of yelling and screaming and pestering you. So she's going to learn that that's just not worth my time to do or not worth my energy to do. And so those behaviors will go away at some point. We don't want to ignore unsafe behaviors. And so some aggression behaviors or some harmful behaviors, those are things that we're going to want to address. But anything that's minor, that is just kind of those refusal, yelling, screaming type things, those are ones that we don't want to put attention on to. And what Julie will learn with repeated and consistent use of these is that ignoring expectations leads to no attention. I'm not getting anything from anybody at this point, and it's more time away from my preferred activities. If I just do it, I get access to my preferred activities and I get positive attention from my parents, and that's more what I want. And it's just not worth the effort to go through this whole cycle of being in timeout over and over and over again. So just to kind of recap a little bit, right? We want to provide a very clear expectation and we want to make sure a very clear positive consequence can occur and a very clear negative consequence can occur. And then that positive consequence looks like positive attention. Thank you for doing this. I love that you're doing this. I appreciate that you did this, as well as escape, as in access to desired activities, right? She no longer has to do the unpreferred activity because she did it for us. And then the no attention, right, the negative consequence, we don't want to give any attention at that point. We want to make it really boring. There's nothing that's going to happen from that. And so she's not going to get your attention. She's going to have to sit in a chair and it's going to be really boring and not very exciting for her. And then she also is delaying being able to access desired activities, right? Because this cycle is continuing. So we just want to make sure that those are in place for making sure she knows very clearly this is what happens when the positive, when I follow through with what I'm supposed to do, then this negative will happen if I don't follow through. And then the last strategy that we're going to talk about tonight is play. Okay. And this is just a side strategy that we add that makes a huge difference in that whole cycle. So, this is where we're accessing that point that we talked about, where humans naturally seek out positive experiences, emotions, and relationships. And so, we're going to use that to our advantage in our parenting to be able to really help the situation when we're in those non-preferred activity situations with our child. So, what this is we're just playing with our child. Okay. So for 5 to 15 minutes every single day. So it seems like a lot when you think about it, like, oh, I have to play with my child every single day. We're really busy. There's a lot of things going on. But if you can break that down to about 5 minutes, that's like a commercial break, right? That's like a quick few reels on your phone. It's not a whole lot of time when you're just thinking about just 5 minutes a day. You're going to sit with your child and you're going to let them kind of lead some play. It's really important that you're not using play activities that have a lot of structure, a lot of rules that everybody has to follow. We want it to be something really creative and imaginative, something where your child can really take the lead and really show off their imagination and their creativity. So things like coloring, Legos, playing with blocks, like different activities, playing with animals or dolls. Something where they're going to be having a little bit of imagination coming out, something that they can take control of, that the game isn't dictating the rules. And what you want to do is you want to let them take the lead. So they just are going to tell you what you're going to do, and you're just going to follow. If you guys are going to be playing Martians on the moon, you're playing Martians on the moon, right? And that's just what they want to do at that time, and you're just following their lead. So the other part of this is while your child is playing with you, you're just attending to your child. Nothing else is going on. It's just you and your child. Your child is making all the rules about how you're going to play and how you're going to engage and what world you're going to be in today. And you're just attending to them. You're just fully engulfed with them and what they're doing. And so, an easy way to be really attentive with them is just to describe what they're doing, right? You don't have to do anything crazy. You can just say, oh, well, here's a great example. You put the green triangle on top of the red square. You're just describing what they're doing. You don't have to do anything beyond that. Just saying, oh, I see what you're doing. Because what that communicates to your child is, oh, my parent is paying attention to me. Like, oh, they're seeing what I'm doing. They saw that I did that, right? I'm actually their whole world right now. This is great. And then also another strategy you can use is just reflecting back what they say. So for example, if your kid's like, "Oh, this purple is so pretty. Purple's my favorite color." And you say that purple is so pretty. I know that purple is your favorite color. And you're just giving them just positive attention. Another thing that you can add into that is just praising them for the behaviors that you would like to see. So sometimes with playing with blocks, a kid will be hitting the block on the floor, and that's not what you want them to be doing. We're going to ignore that minor misbehavior of them hitting the block on the floor. And then when they're playing with that block very carefully, praise them for it. Be like, oh, I love how careful you are with the blocks, right? Because then your kid's picking up on, oh, if I play with the blocks this way, my parent really likes that. They are tending to that. So I'm going to keep doing that because I like this attention that I'm getting. And then eventually they're going to stop hitting the block on the floor because they're getting more attention when they don't hit the block on the floor. And again, within the play, we want to ignore those minor misbehaviors. We don't want to ignore the unsafe behaviors. Okay. So the reason that we do this, right, just a quick 5 to 15 minutes a day with your child is because with consistent play, your positive attention starts to mean way more to your child. So instead of it just being a little bit of a motivator, it becomes a big motivator because they start to love spending time with you and love that attention and that positive regard that you give them every single day. And so when you start using that for when they need to fold the laundry, it's going to mean more to them when they get it, right? When they do the laundry and you go, oh, thanks for doing that. I love how you folded your laundry. That's going to mean more to them because they really like when you're doing this with them throughout the day. So those are just a few of the skills that we talk about within PMT. So the first one, right, just to kind of recap some of these things that we've discussed, is just giving very clear, consistent expectations and consequences. So they know exactly what you're wanting from them, and they know exactly what's going to happen when they do it, and they know exactly what's going to happen when they don't. It's also using your attention to reinforce the desired behaviors, right? So we're putting that big motivator of your positive attention. We're just going to place it on the behaviors that we want to see from our children so that they learn, oh, they like that. I want to keep getting that attention, so I'm going to keep doing that behavior. We want to ignore the minor misbehaviors. Okay. So we want to ignore the things that are not harming anybody, that are just kind of annoying, that are just things that we don't want them to be doing. We don't want to put any attention on those behaviors, and we don't want to reinforce those behaviors in any way. So when we ignore them, kids eventually learn that it's just not worth it to do those things anymore because they're not getting anything out of it. Another strategy is using a timeout from attention and preferred activities as a consequence for undesired behaviors, right? It's that negative consequence piece is using a timeout from attention, making it really boring for them, making it so they cannot access those preferred activities until they follow through with the expectation that you've given. And then they get that positive consequence. They get that attention, they get the preferred activities. And then the last one is just intentionally playing with your child to make your positive attention mean more. This is such a great strategy because not only does it just help with the positive attention meaning more to your child, but it also just helps you enjoy your child, right? So often the world is so busy, we get caught into these fights where we need them to do something and they're just not following through, and everybody's getting frustrated. That sometimes those moments get missed to where we actually just get to spend time with this human that we love and that we love spending attention and time and all these different things with. And we actually get that, right? We're saving that 5 to 15 minutes every single day to make sure that we get that time with that person that we love. So when we use all of these skills together, when we pull them all together and we use them consistently, it can lead to a lot more quality time together because the fight gets taken out, right? We're not at odds with each other. We're not going through the cycle of fighting for an hour before we get the kid to school or fighting for an hour when we get home and then we finally get to homework. We just get to homework immediately, right? We just get to the routine immediately. And that opens up so much more time for us to actually engage with each other in ways that we enjoy and can build those positive relationships in the family. So that's just kind of an overview of a couple skills. We go through a lot more of these within the actual PMT training itself with a trained clinician. And so we'll talk about some different ways that you can learn more independently about these skills, but also ways that we can help support you as well. So if you're wanting to learn more just independently, here are some wonderful resources that you can access. There's two different books here. The first one is the Everyday Parenting Toolkit by Alan Kasdan. This is just such a great starter point when you're thinking about ways that you can kind of embed these in your home and learning more about the ways to go about putting these in place and ways to problem solve through different situations that can come up. Another one is called Breaking Free of Child Anxiety and OCD. So this is more for those kind of internalizing concerns that can kind of come up. So if you have a really anxious kid, this is a great way to sort of use some of those strategies and adapt them to your child, particularly in the needs that they have. And then wonderfully, they have Alan Kasdan has set up a training. It's a free online course. It runs every few weeks, if I remember correctly. You can sign up and you just get access to him and his webinars, and he just talks you through all of these different strategies and gives you a little bit more depth on all of these different toolkits and ways that you can use these. So the QR code down here at the bottom will take you right to that website. If you don't have access to that, there's also you can just look up Everyday Parenting, the ABCs of Child Rearing. And then ways we can help you, right? So a trained professional can help by applying these principles in a more accessible way and tailor them to your family. We can help address more complex factors, problem solve through ways that you can kind of apply these in your home. And then we can offer practice and feedback to give you that confidence and that consistency. And we can also help with situations where it's like, I've tried this and it just isn't working. Or when I've done these, it just makes behaviors worse. There's actually a whole principle behind when that happens, and we can kind of help you work through that a little bit. Or if your child is escalating to those aggressive or unsafe behaviors, how do I handle that, right? The ignoring isn't working. They go to an unsafe behavior. What do I do with that? How do I manage that and still use these strategies? And then maybe I have multiple children and they've got so many varying needs. How do I navigate all of that and make sure that this works for each one of my kids? Or maybe there are multiple adults and we are not on the same page with the way that we parent. How do we get on the same page to be able to apply some of these principles in the way that works best for everybody here? So a couple different resources here. The Family Place, there are 3 different locations in Logan that you are more than likely to access here. So there's the one that's actually in Logan, there's Hiram, there's Smithfield. They are a great resource. They do a lot of parent management training, and so they can be accessed if you are wanting a little bit more support for doing this. And then we can also help you. So we are offering an in-person PMT group, and that's going to be Wednesdays from 6:30 to 7:30. It's going to go for 6 to 8 weeks and be about $6 to $20 per session. And then as soon as the group fits capacity, we will start the group. And so if you're interested in signing up, just give us a call and we can get you in for that group. And then we also offer individual sessions based on a waitlist system. So you just call and we can get you on the waitlist. And the QR code there will get us to our website too. So, okay, that's all I got for you guys. Thank you so much for joining me with this. I will turn it over to Sarah here, who's going to talk you through some of the questions that you guys have about all these parent strategies.
Thank you so much, Kelsey.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. It's so great to visit these strategies. And we do. We have a couple of questions in the chat. So the first one is that validating feelings is still important, and often the misbehavior is a sign of some sort of unmet emotional need. So how can we ignore the negative behavior while still not providing attention to those deemed misbehaviors?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And, I think that ultimately what we want to try to do is really distinguish between feelings and behavior. And with the differential reinforcement, be looking to shape in the direction of finding the words to articulate what's going on rather than acting out what's going on. And I think that that's why it ends up being so important to work with a clinician to really fit this to your child, fit this to your family, fit this to what your goals would be for how your family operates. I've worked with so many parents over the years that to help them kind of choose the battles that are going to work best for their home and to, maybe let other things go. But we would want to make sure that the child has the emotional vocabulary in place to be able to not have behavior be the only way that they're talking to us. And so we would want to be shaping in the direction of you know, you're allowed to be mad, right? Let's talk about that. Let's be mad, but you can't hit your brother. And so we would want to use that differential reinforcement to kind of shape in that direction.
Yeah, I love that. I think something that's always resonated with me is the concept of, always separate the child from the behavior because we'll ignore the misbehavior and then, give our attention to the positive behavior, but always separating, like validating that emotion, um, just like you just described, that's okay to feel angry. Of course, that I can see that that's upset you, but you can't hear your brother.
Yeah. And I think the timing is where it gets really tricky because when children are acting out, and that's when we opt to validate emotion, it's confusing for them and it actually reinforces the behavior we don't want to see more of. So sorting out kind of the timing of when do we have that conversation is something we would want to pay very close attention to as a team together. Um, so that we're because actually getting down and lecturing is probably one of the most reinforcing things we can possibly do when a child is misbehaving. And so then we will see more and more and more of that behavior that we as the parent have decided we don't want to see more of. But it doesn't mean we can't have that conversation. We just want to be careful about when we have that conversation. So
Yeah, love that. The next question is around the limitations of the studies that have been done with parent management training. So the concern about some strategies could possibly lead to children having a more people-pleasing personality where they feel that all of their behaviors need to direct towards how it pleases others and not about their own goals and passions.
Yeah.
And so just wondering,
Yeah.
if this is something that came up in the studies, curiosity around if it leads children to feel that they can't make decisions without approval from their parents, could that create bigger issues in the future? And they have a harder time making decisions as an adult because no one's praising them for that. So do they kind of end up with that need to be praised and then end up in a controlling situation because someone that's very controlling would do that for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is such a fabulous question, and I have spent a good chunk of my career working with folks later in life on kind of people pleasing. And so I think a lot about this when I'm working with families, and that we want to be very, very thoughtful about um, which behaviors we apply this to, and very thoughtful about really reinforcing. Um, Effective communication about where one's coming from, where the child, like how the child is viewing the situation and what matters to them and what they want. Like those are behaviors I would want to be reinforcing. um, when the older a child gets, the less we want to be using praise itself as reinforcement, because praise is inherently judgmental. And so if you're judging me positively, you're also judging me negatively. So we kind of want to move away from that as kids get older. Um, but I like to work with parents to come up with a very, very short list of behaviors that we're trying to shape at any given moment. And, we're really kind of trying to shape away from extreme behaviors. And we don't want to turn them into little robots. That's not what these strategies are about. But a lot of the kids that I've worked with in this capacity, are, maybe harming others, harming property, behaving in ways that are making family life very, very difficult, refusing to go to school, refusing to do some of the things that they need to do to be well and healthy. And like those are some of the behaviors that we would be using most of these strategies on, not having an opinion. And I think like across my career, I don't know about you, Kelsey, but sometimes I've had to like really be honest with parents that I think they're overusing these strategies, and sort of extending these strategies in that direction of having an overcompliant child. And so I think that would be part of the work, is figuring out where do we use this and where do we just let a kid be a kid. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, wonderful. Um, okay, are there any other questions? So please feel free to share if there are any other questions, please let us know. And I will watch for that, but just want to reiterate the resources that they have shared, and also just thank you to Kelsey and Sarah for sharing this wonderful information. It's just helpful to get, I think, good information in small chunks so that we don't get overwhelmed by it. I think sometimes we think, oh, we have to change everything we're doing, and that's really not what's helpful. We parent in small moments, making small repairs and small shifts over time. And so even noticing just something new tonight is enough. And I just want to remind you that ultimately we want to connect with our kiddos. So more connection rather than perfection. And so thank
mhm.
you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time to do this work for your family, for yourself. And next month, we'll be talking about shame-free conversations that will be presented by CAPSA. And just a thank you to our sponsors, the College of Arts and Sciences and Bear River Health Department, for the funding going into this. And then last, I would just want to invite you to help us to continue offering free education. We do need your feedback. So if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to complete the evaluation form, we want to continually improve what we offer and also bring you topics that are relevant and helpful as you are on this parenting journey. And the evaluation is completely confidential. We have no way to know who filled it out. And we also are going to provide a drawing for you. So at the end of the evaluation, you'll have the opportunity to opt in if you would like to be put into our drawing. And we are giving away a really nice family basket. This will be full of family activities that you can do with your family. And you will be notified within 1 week of tonight. And then you'll be able to pick up your basket at the Bear River Health Department. I'll provide the address, but it's located on 1400 North. So please, if you'll help us out doing that. And I just would end with, I hope you'll take tonight what's useful, leave the rest, and just continually return to that idea that behavior is communication, connection is prevention, and small, consistent, intentional effort is what makes the biggest difference over time. So please, you're welcome to leave me any information in the chat. I will see if I can navigate, over there without losing this. Sometimes it doesn't want to come up for me, my menu. Um, I might need to, there we go. Navigate back to the chat. Okay, so I did leave the link for that in case you're not able to scan that QR code. I did leave that in the chat, but it doesn't look like there's any other questions. So thank you so much. Also, if you're a professional and you need CEUs for this, you're welcome to scan that QR code and that will take you to the survey to get your CEU credit, which will be emailed to you within a couple of weeks. But thanks again, Kelsey and Sarah. A big shout out to the Sorenson Legacy Foundation Center for Excellence. We really appreciate your expertise tonight and hope that that parent management training resource will be shared out. It's a wonderful program and support that you're offering our community. So thank you everyone for being here. Have a great night.
Thanks, guys.
Can we stop?